This is a rare subject because normally I know nothing more than 10 minutes worth on anything, but this is one subject which deserves a lot of consideration. And I'll do my best to compress what I know into the time available. And apologies to any of my panel colleagues if they suffer from the consequences of me not quite succeeding. But this is a hugely, hugely important issue, and Marty, thank you for painting the picture and using the right words to describe this horrific form of child sexual abuse. My name is Peter Davies, and for the last 2.5 years I've been Chief Executive Officer of CEOP, which is the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre, which is the UK's law enforcement-led child protection centre. Our mission is to protect children from sexual exploitation and sexual abuse, not just in the UK, but certainly children who are affected by threats from the UK, but also children in the UK who are affected by threats from abroad, and that also exists. What I'm going to deliver to you is a very brief overview of our current understanding of the issues, some examples of what we are currently doing and the opportunities that may present themselves shortly, and then hopefully give colleagues enough time to fill in. I think it's fair that CEOP has had but de facto, the UK law enforcement lead on travelling sex offenders since we came into existence in 2006. But it's only really in the last 12 months, through a variety of means, that we've been able to invest significantly more resource in understanding this problem to a new level. Next week, on the 14th of May, we will publish our annual report, our centre plan for the year, and also our public version of our threat assessment on child sexual exploitation and abuse, which will cover this topic, among others. And those of you with a sustained interest in this issue, I believe you wouldn't hear if you didn't have that, I encourage you to access that next week. One of the things that is always important is to understand how little you know. I'm not here to tell you the whole story about travelling sex offenders because I don't know it, and I may not be an expert myself, but people working in the centre are experts. We know a lot more than we did a year ago, but that is not the same as knowing everything. It's very easy in this business to be led by cases, to see, for example, the situation in Thailand and to want to go there and sort that out. The risk is that in doing that, and being fully busy as we could be doing that, we blind ourselves to other parts of the world which may be equally or possibly even more at risk, and where the gap between what's provided to prevent, to protect, and to pursue is even greater than in Southeast Asia. So we have to be careful always to have the humility to realise there are things we don't know. And CEOP is already on a trajectory to understand more, but in 12 months' time, if we have this session again, I'll be able to give you an even richer picture than that, which we'll be able to publish next week and which I'll cover briefly today. Where we've got to with this is understanding that there are different types of offending. There is something called child sex tourism, which is a commonly used phrase, but that is not necessarily the biggest threat to children outside of the UK. In our view, the UK nationals who travel to offend fall into two main groups. One we call transient, and that includes people who may not actually have a massive sexual interest in children, certainly don't travel with the intention of committing abuse, but the opportunity presents itself and they take that opportunity. Also included in that transient group is our typical child sex tourist who may live in the UK but plans to travel to certain parts of the world with the intention of exploiting children there for sexual purposes. The other type of offender is what we call an embedded offender, who may be a UK national who goes and lives in a different country. In that sense, they're not tourists, they are simply expatriate residents of other countries. But running a centre of 130 or so people trying to tackle all forms of child sexual abuse in the UK and arising from the UK means you have to prioritise pretty carefully. And our view is that probably the highest risk individuals are those individuals who embed themselves in communities abroad and exploit them. And the reason why they are the highest risk is because they have access 24 hours a day. They often put themselves in positions of trust and authority, which give them access to multiple victims, and even more safety from prosecution or interdiction than the average person. And they often build networks around them and attract other offenders. So some of these people are the highest threat individuals. CEOP, of course, has pursued a number of them, in countries such as Thailand, Cambodia, and Philippines. And one example I'll give you in the time available was a gentleman called David John Griffin, who ran a largely UK-funded orphanage in the northern part of Cambodia, and was interdicted by the Cambodian National Police and an NGO working on the ground in Cambodia with support of CEOP. And our assessment was that there were 49 children resident in his orphanage who had been sexually abused and were still at significant risk. And what we had to do there was basically take not just Mr. Griffin out of the orphanage and get him prosecuted, which we did, but actually take his associates out of the management of the orphanage, and then put the orphanage back together so that it was managed in a proper, correct way. That's my definition of the most dangerous kind of person. I'll have to move on. We also need to understand that there is a lot more going on out there than we're currently aware of. We also need to take note of the fact that some of the forms of transnational child abuse are now almost entirely technical. We deal with cases where British nationals stay in the UK but commission and pay for sexual abuse of children in another country, which is video streamed back to them for their gratification. And that doesn't involve getting on a plane, but it fits my definition of very serious crime, and it is another phenomenon that we have to tackle as well. I know I'm speaking to parliamentarians, but I will defer to Hugh about the issue of the inadequacies of the current legislation in terms of prevention and the areas for improvement. My observation is twofold on that. One is that I think Hugh's proposals, which have yet to be fully adopted by ACPO, which I personally have a lot of time for, will, if accepted, go a long way to assisting people in tackling the tourist, the transient offender. But we always need to reach out beyond that. The other thing I would say is that the people we know about, such as registered sex offenders, are generally not the highest threat individuals. The biggest threat individuals, the people who aren't on a sex offenders register, are off the radar. And our prevention measures, hugely valuable though they will only be effective against those minority of high threat offenders who are known to us. Briefly, if I may, things that we are doing and things that will happen in the near future. CEOP runs, and has run for a number of years, an international child protection network where we aim to build capacity, build links and partnerships of the kind you might take for granted in the UK, in parts of the world where they don't exist and where they are sorely needed to protect children. And so far our activity has been centred in a number of countries in Southeast Asia, but also in Eastern Europe, but I think there is a need for us to be active in other parts of the world, possibly including parts of Africa, India and Bangladesh and South America, and we're planning to find out how we can reach out to those places. Something we introduced in October, which is really important, and actually NGOs or anybody employing UK nationals abroad needs to be aware of, is an International Child Protection Certificate. Devised and created by CEOP in partnership with the ACPO Criminal Records Office. This is effectively a CRB check for UK nationals working abroad. We wouldn't dream of taking away the CRB check to protect our children in the UK. CEOP working with ACPO has basically replicated that process, and it's applicable for UK nationals working in charities, schools, any employment where they might have privileged access to children anywhere in the world, and the demand for that is rapidly growing. But we're still in the business of getting people interested, making people aware of that scheme. Those are two really useful prevention measures. It's also very important to protect children on the ground, and to do that we have, as we do in the UK, to rely on local agencies and local capacity, properly informed and advised by some of our specialists. I think where the game may really change by the end of 2013 will be in the creation of a National Crime Agency, of which CEOP will be a command. It's very clear from all the government declarations about the National Crime Agency that protecting children will be an increased focus for the National Agency. It will have an increased international presence, and I for one can't wait to be able to lean back on 4,500 people, all of whom have as part of their mission protection of children, many of whom have significant expertise that they can bring to bear, and an organisation that has a well-known presence. And I believe the awareness that you, Barty, and your excellent organisation and others are raising around this intelligently channelled through CEOP into the MCA's decision-making process, will lead to very significant changes in the way that offenders are pursued. I've probably taken up my time, for which I'm very grateful. I'd be delighted to tackle any questions people have in due course, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Hugh and Simon have to say as well. Thank you.